Years ago, I was given an invite to tour an Agile space. Never having seen one, I was quite excited about the opportunity. And when I walked through, I noticed something. Not only were people working, but they were enjoying themselves. They were smiling. And I said to myself, I'm going to learn what this Agile stuff is all about. My name's Dan Greenleaf. I am a practice lead of Agile here at ICC in Columbus, Ohio. I'm also active in the Agile community with Lean Lunchbox, Central Ohio Agile Association, and other organizations as well. Start here with the Dilbert cartoon because it tells me Agile's made it mainstream. And we all know that as Agile's actually not only gone end-to-end within the IT sphere, but we've actually started to penetrate into the business sphere. I read articles on the Harvard Business Review about how Scrum can help your team. A little comic here from Dilbert, as we all know. We're going to try something called Agile programming. That means no more planning, no more documentation, just start writing code and complaining. I'm glad it has a name. Well, that was your training. And unfortunately, this isn't too far off reality for some people. A lot of times they'll try rolling out Agile simply with a basic training that, may consist of half a day or even just a day and call that done. So what is Agile anyway? Well, a lot of people have a misunderstanding that Agile's all about story cards, team spaces, no documentation, iterations, no project management. Everyone just does their job and it's easy. Even a one-step solution for every problem. Well, I'm here to tell you, not so subtly, that's not what Agile is. Going back to give you a brief little history of Agile, you have to understand that Agile actually started as a counter movement to big, heavy development and design. It actually goes all the way back to the 50s, when three gentlemen, Sakichi Toyota, his son Kichiro Toyota, and their engineer Deming, came and toured the River Rouge plant in Michigan. While they weren't terribly impressed with their tour of the plant, they went grocery shopping at a Piggly Wiggly later and were very impressed with how food flowed from the suppliers all the way through to the front aisles on an as-needed basis, not creating extensive inventories, increasing warehouse costs and waste. Later in the 80s, object-oriented programming came on the scene, which allowed for the segmentation and creation of code in individual increments as opposed to big monoliths. A little tidbit of history for those who are interested. The first time Scrum was actually mentioned in relation to software development was in a Harvard Business Review article back in 1986 where they talked about a holistic product development approach. Things heated up in the 90s when Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber created Scrum, which they first debuted at Uppsala 95. And then in the late 90s, things heated up even more when XP was created. The real culmination of Agile as we know it today was a document that was signed by 17 gentlemen, including the creators of XP and Scrum, at the Snowbird Lodge in Utah back in 2001. What they were signing, in my mind, was the ultimate example of great minds thinking alike. At the time, Scrum, Crystal, DSDM, and other approaches to delivering software shared something in common, and they knew it, and this was their way of explaining what these approaches shared, which at the time was a very small part of the development community. This document, as we know it today as the Agile Manifesto, is really based around 4 core values: individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. So let's break these 4 core values down. So individuals and interactions over processes and tools. This is about looking at people as the way to solve problems, not process. At the time, heavy process was king. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, the thought was that put together the right process, and then you can interchangeably add people as necessary to deliver value. What Agile was suggesting was that you put together a team of people and allow them to create the solution. You enable them, you empower them, you don't drive them with processes and tools. If you think the solution to every problem is a new process, you're not being very agile. Next, we have working software over comprehensive documentation. Again, back in the late 90s, it was common to create hundreds, even thousands and tens of thousands of pages before the first line of code was written. This led to a challenge whereby value had to be expressed in terms of earned value without a single line of code being delivered to production and no actual working value for customers being received. In Agile, it's not that we don't believe in documenting things. We certainly do, but our focus is and will always continue to be on working software. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. A long time ago, I was a project manager on a small project. And on this project, we had a set of requirements that had to be delivered. We delivered those requirements on time, on budget, and handed them over to the customer. The customer was not very happy because while we'd met the letter of the requirements, we hadn't actually delivered the value they needed. As a project manager at the time, all I could do was say, these are the requirements you signed off on, this is the budget, this is the schedule, and defend my team. Understandably, my business partners were not happy with this. In Agile, we look to empower people to work together to provide a solution. We don't look to hold people accountable and beat them over the head with contracts they signed off on. Responding to change over following a plan. All of us who've been in the IT industry for more than a few weeks have seen plans that get very detailed and very elegant. But reality doesn't oftentimes fit with those plans. Many people will try to force reality into the plan that they initially created. Agile says we plan at a high level, and we adjust our plan as reality emerges. We learn, we grow, and we understand. So before you get all crazy, don't go throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Take a step back and look at the last line in the manifesto on the first page. That is, well, there is value in the items on the right. As Agilists, we still see value in the items on the right. We still see value in processes and tools. We understand that no large organization will ever continuously operate without processes and tools. We understand the need for comprehensive documentation. Certainly, many things need to be documented in any large organization and even most small organizations. We understand the need for contracts. It would be unusual for a consultant like myself to be engaged without a contract in place. And certainly we understand the need for following a plan. However, as we understand that all of these are important things, we spend the majority of our time focusing on the items on the left. So in support of these initial 4 core values, the 17 signatories of the manifesto came up with 12 principles. I won't read through all of them here, but I always like to point out the first principle they came up with. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through the early and continuous delivery of valuable software. At the end of the day, having a process in place is nice. Having a great plan is nice. Meeting your deadlines is great. But what's most important, what is absolutely core to what we do as software professionals, is deliver value to the customer, early and continuously. That is our highest priority if we consider ourselves Agilists. So again, Agile is not a set of practices. It's not a process. It's not a one-stop solution or an excuse to skip on planning or documentation or design. Agile is 4 values supported by 12 principles. It's a continuum. You are neither 100% Agile nor not Agile at all. Just as no man is entirely honest 100% of the time or lies 100% of the time. Some men are certainly more honest. Some men certainly tell more lies. Or just as no woman is 100% charitable. Certainly some women give more to charity than others. Agile is simply a way of approaching problems. Now, a lot of people seem to think that the antithesis of waterfall is Agile. And I understand that sentiment, but I do respectfully disagree. The antithesis of waterfall is iterative. In an iterative world, you deliver in multiple increments. That's by definition. In a waterfall world, you deliver with one big bang at the end, again by definition. What you do inside of those either iterations or big bang approach may or may not be more or less Agile. So if we take a look at iterative, it says, again, you must deliver in iterations. Agile, well, generally does deliver in iterations. It doesn't necessarily have to. A little more on that, research Kanban is the most common approach to non-iterative Agile. Iterative can believe people are the key to solving problems, that teams working together are the right approach, or it can be very process heavy. You can have documents on top of documents, rules on top of rules in an iterative environment. In an Agile environment, you must believe people are the key to solving problems. You have processes in place, but they are not heavy or onerous. In an iterative environment, you can be very based on sign-off and contract negotiation. Every next step can require sign-off by 10 people, or it can be very highly collaborative. In an Agile environment, you must be collaborative. Again, iterative can be very documentation heavy or very light. In an Agile environment, we must produce only documentation necessary to deliver the software and the value to production. I've been in environments that are very command and control and iterative, some even calling themselves Agile, where a manager will dictate whose responsibility is what, assign tasks, and then reward and punish those based on their performance. In an Agile world, we empower teams. We empower the teams to work together to solve the problems and to deliver the value. So, brief note about cargo cults. Back in World War II, many industrialized nations went to lightly inhabited islands that had native populations. While there, they set up air bases so that they could bomb or perform reconnaissance missions or other things from their planes. The native populations on these islands would inevitably interact with the soldiers, and they would trade. They would trade for things like candy and pots and pans and knives and other items of technology that they'd never seen before. Well, World War II came to an end. These industrialized nations no longer had a need for these runways on these remote islands. They packed up ship and they left. When they left, the native populations wanted more chocolate. They wanted more pots and pans and knives and metal tools and all the wonderful things that the armies and air forces had brought them. What they did to get these things back was they mimicked what they'd seen in the past. So the cargo was the wonderful things that they'd been brought. The cult is almost a religious way of attempting to regain these things. So they built wooden planes and wooden rifles. They built wooden radios, air bases, rifles. They marched around, and their hope was to regenerate these wonderful things. They never did. The chocolates never showed up. We see this very frequently in Agile implementations where people, without understanding the values, try to recreate the same practices they see implemented in other organizations. If you walk into an Agile space and you see story cards and a team room and a board with all the visual radiators you would expect, and you go back to your organization and implement those same things without understanding why they added value, why they worked in that environment, you'll likely not get the results you hoped for. It'll be just as effective as this wooden plane you see here. So if you have questions about Agile, please feel free to email me at dgreenleaf@icct.com. And if you happen to live or work in the Central Ohio area, please check out the Central Ohio Agile Association at www.cohaa.org. Thank you.